as you know, along with the tragedy of coronavirus and COVID-19, came the world's economic collapse as the world hunkered down, and we're all dealing in different times now. Congress has passed some stimulus bills, several stimulus measures. Some of that money is available to first responders. Here tonight to talk about those programs, and we're particularly going to focus on the assistance to firefighter grant and what that supplemental money did for that grant. I know you've heard about other parts of the CARES Act that may pertain to smaller businesses and nonprofits and things like that. And some of those options may be available to you, but that's not going to be the focus of our webcast here tonight. We're talking about money available specifically for first responders. Tonight, Andrea Selmon from FEMA is here. If you've been to some of our conferences in the past, she's been there as an exhibitor. She's been there as a lecturer, talking about the AFG program and what FEMA does. This is the side of FEMA that does the grants. There's all different sides of FEMA. So Andrea's going to talk about some of that. She's going to talk about what's changed, some of the opportunities that are available for ESDs to secure some funding. And Andrea, thank you for being here tonight. I'm just going to let you take it away with your PowerPoint. You can start sharing your screen, and we'll get it underway.
Great, thank you. Let me click on it for you right here. Okay, how's the visual?
I'm seeing it great through my Zoom, and they should be seeing basically they should be seeing this with a couple of hidden, I think Cliff's hiding us. So you go ahead and do your thing.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Clay, and I really appreciate the welcome, the invitation to participate tonight. Thank you to everybody that is watching and for spending your dinner / happy hour with us this evening. My goal is to make it worth your while and provide some good information and hopefully tie a lot of this information together. I know it's overwhelming, all the information that is out there. And so if we can just pick at it piece by piece in this interactive type format, then I think we've all spent our time well. So I have a slide presentation to keep myself on track and also just to guide our discussion. And I understand that Clay will facilitate a question and answer at the end. So I just want to give a little bit of information about myself. Like Clay mentioned, I work with FEMA at Region 6 out of Denton, Texas. And I've been doing grants for a very long time. And so I came into FEMA on the disaster side and have that experience, and then made my way over to the non-disaster side of FEMA grants operations. And like I mentioned or alluded to, there's many, many different sides. So when we are able to partner with Clay and Safety and go out as exhibitors, we've always done so representing the Assistance to Firefighters grant, because that's the primary grant for your target audience. So we love it, we enjoy it, and love these types of forums where we can just engage with you and get information out and also clarify a lot of information, because again, it is overwhelming. So with that said, let's go down, talk a little bit about, I put a housekeeping slide on because if you're like me, I don't know, I do have kids working homeschooling during this pandemic, and so I'm used to going through some housekeeping every morning with them, especially with all of us on Zoom sessions, but I just wanted to kind of set some expectations up for you. Clay also alluded to what the scope of the call, what it is and what it's not. So I'm just going to piggyback on that a little bit. So muting, please don't pay attention to that. That's typically with some other types of formats that we have to worry about muting the phones, but obviously with this, it's perfectly controlled. The AFG program office versus regional staff. I like to start with this because when you see me, when you see our presentation, when you see FEMA, it's very difficult sometimes to determine who exactly at FEMA am I talking to. And I actually have to do a lot of this at conferences and saying, okay, so we are the regional staff. We're the closest to you. We're based out of our headquarters in Denton, Texas, as I mentioned. The AFG program staff is in headquarters, and they maintain full programmatic authority. So amendments and programmatic extensions, things of this sort, go through them for final approval. But we are your first line and front line of customer service, and we also do your monitoring. So it's very possible that I've been out or spoken with several of your departments on the phone to do monitoring visits or desk reviews, not audits, but reviews, compliance reviews. And also just on the phone, we just man the phones at region, and we direct traffic. So if there are items that are beyond the scope of our ability, like if you have a very complicated amendment request, if you're a current recipient, or you really want to get into the weeds about a type of application that you want to submit, but you're not sure if it'll get funded, then we facilitate that call with headquarters and try to make sure that you craft that application for to be as successful as it possibly can. So that's how we work together. So again, we're closest to you, and our phone lines are always open, our emails, and of course, when we do forums like this, we recognize that there was going to be questions possibly outside the scope of what we can do tonight. And you might have questions that you've been thinking about that may not fit or aren't germane to what we're talking about tonight, but they are to the program. So if that's the case, then please, we'll park it. We'll make sure I'll follow up with Clay and get you to the right person. I don't ever guarantee that I'll get you the right answer, but more often than not, with AOG, we're directing traffic and get people to the right person that can answer that. So just want to kind of make that clear. What it won't be today, unfortunately, we don't have any information about SAFE or FPNS. For those that aren't familiar with the suite of fire grant programs, SAFER is primarily for recruitment and retention of firefighters, and then fire prevention and safety is very much a research and development grant that is also managed by headquarters and the program office at headquarters in DC. So we won't be touching on those today. This is specifically the Assistance to Firefighters grant. And then, as Clay mentioned, there's tons and tons of information about CARES Act funding. We're not going to deep dive into that, although there's so many resources out there for you, and that you can research and Google, and a lot of webinars like this as well that are informative. So I won't be able to go into any detail about the rest of the package that doesn't deal with AFG, but just know that there are resources out there. FEMA Go, I know there's a lot of questions about FEMA Go. We won't be able to get into that tonight. However, if you do have questions, allow me to point you to the right direction or try to answer them after our session tonight. And then things like SAM.gov, financial requirements, a lot of the things that typically you'll hear about on AFG webinars or application webinars. We're not going to have a lot of time to get into that, but I will point you to the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, for those of you that don't know what the NOFO is. And I will pull it up. We're going to call it up on my screen so that you can see where you can get answers to some of those questions. And then we'll end with Q&A. So what are we going to accomplish within the time that we have left together? Well, I wanted to talk about the proposed timeline, where we are in the process for the Assistance to Firefighter Grant Supplement, okay? And then what the next few months, couple weeks looks like. And that's real-time information that I did get from the program office before this call. So I wanted to make sure I did my research and my homework and provide you with maybe some answers that you wouldn't be able to get just searching on your own. So as a bonus for making the commitment to be present on this webinar, I wanted to make sure I got some good nuggets of information for you that you don't have to dig for. We're going to talk about AFGS. We're going to call it now, instead of going Assistance to Firefighters Grant Supplement, we're just going to call it the AFGS for the rest of our session. What is it? And then we're going to talk about how you get it. And we're also going to talk about what this means for ESDs. I know when I started working with Clay in this partnership, I had to go to school on what ESDs are and what is the target audience as far as the Assistance to Firefighters Grant. What does ESD and AOG have in common? And what can ESDs do as this large network of departments? How can they actively and proactively apply and acquire Assistance to Firefighters Grant funding? So we're going to make that connection for you tonight so that you understand, as an ESD, what does that mean specifically when you decide to go out for funding for AFGS or AFG in general. Then there's some regional application reminders. We're going to hit on the types of just some key points on regional applications, because ESDs are very good. They're very well positioned to go out for those very big $1 million plus regional applications. So we're going to talk about that and just some things you need to keep in mind. Some other key factors just pertaining to the overall process. Then we have a couple of, a listing of all of the AFG regional applications that have been awarded since 2006. There's a list on the slide deck. It will be available for distribution. Clay will send it out. But also just some fun slides in terms of what the funding has looked like. You know, you're thinking to yourself, well, if I'm going to do all this work, then what are my chances? So we have a few slides on that. And then we're going to wrap it up with some resources that to remind you of where you can go to get answers. Okay, so we're going to get started. So I promised you that we would talk about the key dates and times. So right now, the application for AFGS, the application window is still open, and it's going to close this Friday, the 15th. Then we're going to go, when I say them, AFG Program Office headquarters is going to go straight to panel reviews. So this is a very compressed, very ambitious time frame, but they have decided they're going to be able to make it work, and they're going to possibly issue awards between May 25th for AFGS. It's anywhere between May 25th and June the 5th. So at the top, what you have are key dates and times that were published and then notice of funding opportunity. So if you have a copy of that, or if you've been looking at that, I'm going to call it up in a couple of more slides, but that is basically the specs to the grant. That's all the requirements, the just generic information that you need to know how to apply. If you've never applied for AFG, it's actually a very abbreviated application for AFGS because there's only a few categories of funding. And so the top part that you see here is taken straight from that document, from the NOFO. So you'll notice that the application start date is April 28th. Then the submission deadline is May 15th at 5 p.m. Eastern. Anticipated funding selection date, June 5th, and then anticipated award date, June 5th. But if you look at the bottom, the second row in the chart at the bottom of the slide here, you'll see that the AFGS is actually slated to start awarding by May 25th, which is very soon. So that's sort of a adjusted time frame based on the latest and greatest information from headquarters, which is great news because the quicker they get money out on the street, the better. However, they do have to publish the anticipated award date as late as possible, which is June 5th, so that they have that range. But when I checked in, just as recent as yesterday, they did confirm that yes, the time frame that you're seeing at the bottom of the slide there is the most realistic. So that's good news. And as you'll see for SAFER and FP&S, this is the only place I mentioned it in the slide deck. I went ahead and included those timeframes for you in case you were interested in applying. But the awards, the panel review, and the PPR, post-panel review, is still TBD. So that's just a good overview of where we are and where we're headed. So within the next couple of weeks, we'll be very, very, very busy. So what is AFGS? I pulled the objectives on the left side of the slide there so that we keep this focus, that the AFGS is a supplement to provide critically needed resources to equip personnel to respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency and support community resilience. It's very important that we stay focused on the objective of the grant program. It sounds very simple, but it's very easy to stray when you're preparing applications. So everything related to grant programming that came out as a result of COVID-19 has to have a nexus or connection to COVID-19. So this is a very, very important part of all the programming, all the grant program that has come from the stimulus package. So that is a primary objective here. And AFGS is basically a subpart of a very large set of measures that came out of that $2.2 trillion relief package. So out of that $2.2 trillion, $400 million was pulled for firefighters, emergency managers, and emergency food and shelter programs. And of that, we have $100 million specifically for AFGS. So that is what we're working with, $100 million. Now, I did speak with headquarters recently, as I mentioned, and it's very possible, as you all know, if you're civically engaged and you're on all the forums, you're very well aware that all organizations are pushing for additional funding. And there could be another application period later this year. So just keep that in mind. So even though the application period for this round is ending this week, just keep in mind as you listen to the rest of the slides and let your brain kind of process and kind of piece together what you would have to do next for a regional application. Think about that because you'll very likely have another chance later this year. So, but right now, 100 million is what we're working with. And a lot of people out there are saying, gosh, it's just PPE and, supply. Why so narrow? Well, the statute was very narrow. So, and as a result, we had to make sure that the program requirements aligned with that very narrow statute stating that it had to have a connection to COVID-19. So that's why normally you would see a lot more categories of funding, but that's why you're only seeing this eligible PPE and supply available for the supplement. However, a big feature that a lot of people don't really understand that came for the supplement is a pre-award cost. This is the first time in the program's history that they have made pre-award costs available. And why is that important? It's important because a lot of departments, ESD, members of ESDs and non-members alike, have spent a very, very unimaginable amount of money responding to the crisis, money that was not planned for that purpose. So everybody's coming to the economic realization that, wait a minute, starting from months and months, we came out of pocket for this response that was never part of our budget. So the fact that applicants can apply for pre-award costs that are occurring or incurred starting January 1st of this year up until the time of application is huge. It's very, very big. And to be able to do that with the limited time frame that they had to throw the notice of funding opportunity together is almost unheard of. So it took less than 21 days to build this particular NOFO. So keep that in mind. If you are applying or had applied this round or the next, just keep that in mind. It's a big, big deal. So as we mentioned, that the AFGS is limited to ops and safety, regional apps, and then micro grants. The micro grants are just, you'll see on the overview that I'm about to pull up, they're smaller than if you've been around with AFG for a while, you'll know that they're more than what this particular supplement allows for. It's up to $3,000, but it is available. So micro grants, a lot of people say, well, what's the point of a micro grant? And the micro grant has always been intended for a very expedient application process. Not the complicated ones, not the ones that have some very, maybe sticky areas of the application, just very straightforward applications. And that was always the intent of the micro grant format, is to make those oversimplified applications go through a little quicker. So they've extended that on the supplement this time. So if that's something that you're taking advantage of, great. If you haven't, then keep that in the back of your mind. And then the AFGS overview. This is a link to the actual program webpage. And I'm going to try to attempt to take you there just so that you can see interactively what that looks like. And so what you're looking at now is the homepage for the Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program. This is very, very important resource for you to go in and research.
Andrea, I don't think we're on it.
We're not on there. Okay.
You may need to unshare and then reshare.
Thank you for telling me. How about that?
Perfect. Looks good.
All right. Thanks, Clay. Okay, so again, what you're looking at is the homepage for the Firefighter Grant Program. But as you can see, it has SAFER, it has FP&S, and all the other grant programs in the suite there as well. So if you click on Breaking News, then you will see the COVID-19 Supplemental Notice of Funding Opportunity, the NOFO. And if you click on that, you'll go and you'll see there's a cost share calculator, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Then you have the actual NOFO, and then a FEMA Go creation user guide. What is not published to this website, which I want to share with you right now. Just give me a second. There's a 3-pager fact sheet. Are you seeing it, Clay? Am I okay here?
I am seeing the fact sheet, yes.
Awesome. I'm getting it. I'm getting the hang of it.
Yeah, it's difficult with the swapping out and everything. It's a new platform. It is. Your master.
Okay, good. Perfect. So this is a very beneficial 3-pager. It goes through the overview, the purpose, the funding with all the statutes, and eligibility. And this is basically a excerpt from the larger NOFO, but it's a good, quick read. And I wanted to point you to it so that you understood where this was. The 1-pager is actually on the website, and this 3-pager is soon to be published. I believe headquarters was just working on, there was a link that was broken, but I'm happy to send this to Clay for distribution to the audience tonight. It's not a big deal. And It also talks about the program highlights, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you'll see here the eligible organizations and the categories of funding, as we were discussing, evaluation criteria. So I just wanted to point that out to you. For time purposes, I'm not going to go through this particular document, but I do hit on the high points in the rest of the slideshow. So let me switch again back to the show. All right. All right, so the PPE. This particular page, what you're looking at, for the supplement, this is the priority. This is it. In the normal Assistance to Firefighter Grant funding cycle, you will see pages and pages of charts that look just like this, that are high priority, medium priority, low priority, and it'll be broken down by the type of department: career, State Fire Training Academy, EMS, so it'll break it down. In this particular supplement, it's a very abbreviated section because this is the focus. This is the high priority, is PPE. So everything from eye protection, isolation gowns, footwear, respirators, surgical tight face masks. And then pay attention to the additional consideration, because this is very important, not just with the supplement, but also with the AOG program in general. It is a very good way of saying these are the additional areas or consideration that will be looked at, that you have to provide information on, but will have bearing on whether or not you're funded and or the amount that you're funded. So as you can see here, call volume, size of the population is very important. So just be aware of this particular page for the supplement. Like I mentioned, this is it. For a normal AOG, a regular AOG program, full funding that will be coming later on this year, next year, you'll see a much more detailed description of other areas of categories of eligibility. But for the supplement, this is all we have to work with. So again, very narrow focus. So let's talk a little bit about how do you get AOG supplement funding, AOGS. It is competitive. It's just like the regular AOG program. So even though the fire service wanted something similar to like the disaster relief fund, or there are other formula grants like the emergency management performance grant, those are direct allocations to the states. It just wasn't possible with the fire service industry. So so they had to stick to a competitive process. And one of the things that's very difficult to right now during this time is all the different types of the statutory requirements that are tied to the method of awarding. In other words, some do have this direct allocation where those grants have to be made based on formulas. Some have to stay competitive. And so AFG is one of those programs that had to remain competitive. And it has to be competitive within eligible recipients. And the recipients that you see here on the left side of your screen, the fire departments, the non-affiliated EMS organizations, and then the State Fire Training Academies. Those are the eligible applicants for AFGS. And right here in the middle of your screen here, where it says available funding, those are just basically the metrics that you'll find in the NOFO. 100 million, as we mentioned. Out of the 100 million, they're looking at issuing about 1,000 awards. It will be for a 12-month period of time, and there will be an opportunity for extensions for people that are awarded. Those has to be based on approval, has to be approved by the program office. And as we mentioned a couple slides ago, the projected start date for all the awards is May 30th, next in a couple of weeks. And I believe June 5th is sort of the more conservative, latest possible date. So all awards will run through next May. So so that's what we're working with. That's, if you're not one of these eligible fire department or one of these eligible applicants, then this program is not for you. Now, we will talk about in the next slide or so about what this means for ESDs. So, but I wanted to make sure that I laid the groundwork here, and there will be no direct allocations of any sort. Everybody that wants to take advantage of the AFGS will have to apply for it. So, how you apply? What does this mean for ESDs? Well, as we talked about early on, you know, a lot of people I don't think are familiar with, not in the non-ESD community, folks like myself that are in grants management that are trying to understand or have tried over the years to say, okay, what type of audience are we working with, so that I can cater or target, my technical assistants. When I go to these conferences at safety, I found that the conversation that I ended up having with a lot of the commissioners and just the folks that came by the booth was getting everybody, all the ESDs, to realize that ESDs are the best. They're pre-positioned to have a regional impact. There's nobody in a better situation than ESDs to understand what the needs are regionally and go for it. And I'm not really sure that I'm not convinced that a lot of people are understand the impact that you guys have as ESDs. It's monumental. And right now, a lot of departments I get the question all the time at the conferences, and people say, well, is my ESD eligible? And the ESD as a entity is not the eligible entity. That is not who we're looking at. We're looking at the individual department. But when it comes to ESDs, we're looking at a network of departments. So we've had, like I mentioned, we'll see in a few slides of all the successful regional applications, but some ESDs have maybe one or two departments. Some have, more than a dozen or dozens. And so nobody is better positioned than ESDs to understand, okay, what are the regional needs and how do we go for that, for radios, for PPE, for regional vehicles? How can we do that better as a group? And one of the perks for regional application is that you can exceed the $1 million cap. So in the notice of funding opportunity, you'll notice that there are funding limitations based on population size. And regional applications can easily exceed that. Beyond, we've had a couple of 2 million and above over the last 10 years. So there is an incentive to go for these very large programs. And again, regional just means more than one department. It doesn't have to be the dozens. Even if you have dozens within your ESD, maybe only 5 of those really need a regional vehicle or could be direct beneficiaries of, regional, or they have interoperability issues and could benefit from radios. Now for the supplement, that's not an eligible expense, but PPE. So again, you have your finger on the pulse of what is needed in your community. And just the cost effectiveness, the regional efficiency, and the ability to benefit more than one local jurisdiction with one application is very powerful. So headquarters looks at these programs or looks at these applications as regional applications to increase the sharing of resources, especially when they're so limited right now, especially, ventilators and PPE. There's a need to share these resources, to collaborate, to increase interoperability. And so it's very much a matter of just coordinating with each other and understanding, okay, number one, what are our needs? And number two, who's going to take lead on this? And that's when everybody when I give these talks and we go to training and we talk about who's going to be the host, it just crickets. I think there is a lot of intimidation in being the host department because it does require a lot of planning. But we've seen it done very, very well, very, very well for huge impacts. So don't be intimidated by that process. Even right now, you even have time, like I mentioned earlier, there could very well possibly be another application period coming out for the supplement later this year. If you started planning now, then that is a very realistic expectation that you could have a competitive application by the time that next round comes about. So again, you are best suited to identify what the priority needs are in your area, and also for tracking purposes. There's a lot of regionally, I know the community of ESDs is very vocal, and the ability to identify what those needs are and also track them, especially as it pertains to the COVID-19 response, is critical. So these applications, AFG headquarters leans on these types of applications to tell them what the need is in those regions. So again, very powerful structure that the ESDs have right now. So what are some things that you need to be aware of for regional application reminders? Data needs priorities and planning. This is what I decided to put up front as far as the most important things. If you're deciding to be a host or if you just want to be a participating department, you need data. You need good data. You need to be able to to sell the need and determine that you do have that priority for the supplement. Everybody has a priority for PPE right now. It's a very, very high priority. So the planning part is where I think you have to get crafty. And so you don't necessarily have to say right now who's going to take lead at this particular point in time. Once you've started your needs assessment at the ESD level, and you can start zoning in on what departments need what, then you can maybe have a conversation a little bit later about who's going to take that lead. But in either case, whether your regional application has 2 departments or 20, you will still need good data to support what you're asking for and how it will benefit all those jurisdictions on a regional level. So you can't plan soon enough. And I have some very, very nice departments that have come to trainings over the last couple of years that have offered to sort of be, called upon if other communities or regional application host applicants would, need any information or, hey, don't do this, do this. And so I have a few of those people that have offered that help, which I think is very, very critical because you won't know until you've had that experience. Some of them have been awarded. Several of them actually have been awarded and can speak from that as well. So you do need that to lean on. You need to lean on each other, and you need to get planning and started planning as soon as possible. Community characteristics and the organizational status on a regional application is going to be based on the host. So whether you have a conglomerate of rural and urban departments and or suburban, if the host applicant is rural, then that's what the community characteristic will be. Same thing with the type of department. So you can have a combination of volunteer departments that are part of this host department, but if it's going to be hosted by a combination or career department, then that's what's used. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes these types of questions will determine who is going to host. And so it's good to give these considerations early. And then the host must also include a list of all AFG eligible participants. So, I've heard a lot of regional application successful awardees say that it is sort of like herding cats, getting all these departments to fall in line. They have to validate their points of contact, make sure they have EINs, and that they're ready to comply. So it's not just about using the numbers in the aggregate to be able to apply successfully, at the application stage. Once you're awarded, then you have to manage those departments as well to make sure they are compliant. And there's always learning experiences to be had there. I know a lot of people, for example, have an issue with reporting to INFRS, and a lot of departments that don't report, a lot of potential host applicants are saying, well, if I can't get them to report, then what do I do? That's something that we take care of in the post-award environment, meaning after you've been awarded. It's not required that they be reporting to INFRS at the time of application, but eventually it will be. And so, so there are ways to work through things like that. So, but just be comfortable that the participating departments that you are approaching, or when you look within your ESD and saying, okay, these will be viable participants, departments, I know they'll comply, I know, they're good points of contact, I know that they will be responsive. Those are the ones that you do want to work with. Because at the end of the day, the person responsible, the host responsible is the applicant department. So that's who it falls on, is the host department. So you just want to be aware of that. Now, to help control for that, though, memorandums of understanding are required for all regional applications. So this is where you do lay out those expectations. It's not just verbal and emails. You do have to submit MOUs with the applications. And even though there's not a template, headquarters doesn't provide a template for what those MOUs look like. There are some suggested areas that you want to address. I've added the areas of procurement and equipment distribution, especially for PPE, because you want to make sure that if you do a regional application for something like PPE, that you have a plan to figure out how you're going to distribute that and make sure that the departments that are receiving those distributions of equipment can account for the equipment, ensure it's safeguarded and properly maintained. So again, we speak with departments all the time about, hey, I have this included in the MOU. What else would you recommend? And it's really just a casual discussion because, again, there is no formal template. And but our particular programmatic team at Region has taken a lot of notes, and from experience can just provide that feedback to you to make sure that you have most of your bases covered. And cost share is required with the AFG supplements, just like with the regular program, the base program. The important thing to remember is that it's based on aggregate population of the primary first due response area. So again, whose numbers, which departments, and whose numbers are you going to include? And that will determine the amount of your cost share. It's 5, 10, or 15%. Most regional applications are 10 or 15% just because they have a very large population that they serve, the regional applications. So if you have a cost share, maybe I've seen it where counties front the cost share, the 15%, and the participating departments don't have to front the cost share. You can do it that way. Or you could take your 15% and divide it amongst all the participating departments so that everybody has a little skin in the game. That's completely up to you. But the minimum is 5%, the maximum is 15%. And then finally, state fire training academies are not eligible to apply under regional activity. There's more description of that in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, but just wanted to make sure that you guys on this particular webcast knew that, that they weren't eligible to apply. So some key factors and reminders as you go through mulling over your application and whether or not, if you have one in the hopper and you're going to submit it this week, great. If you're going to wait till possibly the next round, just remember that for the particular supplements that are coming out, all of them have to have what we mentioned earlier, a direct link to COVID-19. They have to have that connection. And so make sure you hit that hard and high on your applications and the statement of needs and the benefits. That's going to be very important from a point standpoint, point differentials on the application. And then a lot of departments, we realize might have to do some reallocation. If you've been awarded any supplemental funding, or if you're going to be awarded, we realize that there are going to be some reallocation that might be going on because maybe you've been awarded funding or equipment that you've been awarded money for equipment that you previously budgeted for either on another grant or maybe general fund dollars. So from a grant compliance standpoint, you just want to make sure that you keep that equipment and those allocation of funds where they belong, okay? So you want to keep Grant A separate from Grant B, and you want to just basic grant management 101. And so there's tons of research and resources out there in terms of helping you stay within that those parameters. But I didn't have time to talk too much about that on this particular webcast. But if you Google that and research that, or if you can, ask me offline or get a question and answer or a question to Clay, I'll be happy to go into more depth on that. And then think about your grant operations strategy. As an ESD, think about what are we eligible for? Well, for the supplement, you're eligible for PPE. And what do we need? The AFG has always said in the past with the supplement and the base program, don't apply for what you want, apply for what you need. Because of the nature, how competitive the program is, any excessive need is, it's not just frowned upon, but it may result in your application not being funded. So do your homework and be able to justify, this is the needs assessment that we've conducted based on, in the regional application, based on all of our departments' need, the aggregate need, and this is why we're requesting this much. And this is, we've done the market research, so we estimate it to be this much. And we understand, and program headquarters understands that between the time that you apply and possibly the time that you're awarded, even if it's later on this year with the potential application period, a second one coming, that there's going to be some cost differentials. But do your homework to make sure that you're as close to those estimates as possible. It shouldn't be so overstated that you have so many excess funds, because those large amounts of excess funds could have gone to another department, and sometimes a few departments, if you've overestimated too much. And just think about how you're going to manage and track. Small typo there, but managing and tracking. So, especially with regional applications, how are you going to track your departments? What particular, are you going to have trackers? Are you going to have somebody that's your running point on managing all the compliance factors of the grant? It seems like a lot. There are a lot of technical assistance that at the region we can provide. to set you up for success. And we've gone into when we talk with regional applications, we have very extensive calls to make sure that they're considering the application from all angles, and get very excited, frankly, about the regional applications because we know the impact. So, but just think about your team, who is going to be tasked for those? Who's going to be voluntold to manage and track all this PPE as you distribute it to these departments, or just for yourself if you're not doing a regional application. And then again, making sure that you're always in compliance with the terms and conditions of the award and also the notice of funding opportunity. And that's where we can provide additional technical assistance. So other reminders about the program, AFGS, NFERS is still required. So whether you do a regional or you go, one of the departments in your ESD goes at this solo, NFERS reporting is still required in addition to programmatic and financial reporting. So keep that in mind. EHP for PPE EHP is environmental and historic preservation requirements. Doesn't really factor into PPE only applications or awards, but just keep it, we keep the language in there to remind you that it could. And if it's just something that doesn't apply for your application, then it just doesn't apply. But EHP is a very unforgiving process if you miss that. So we always make sure we throw that in there. And then we did discuss cost share already. Remember about your SAM and DUNS numbers. Again, your participating departments, if you decided to do a regional application, just have to have their EIN. So you'll use the SAM DUNS numbers for the actual host applicant. So sometimes that's that helps. That's a consideration in determining who's going to be the host just based on that. And then be ready to rescope if needed. Remember, you can always ask for what you think you need, even if it's very well justified, but you might be funded under that. So you might go out for $1.5 million and maybe get $1 million on a regional application. So just be ready to rescope. If you get less than what you receive, or if you receive less than what you asked for, what are the implications and how are you going to approach that? So it sounds a little bit like common sense, but unfortunately, a lot of departments don't think about that until it happens. And so prices have gone up or down or everything's shifted. So just have a plan in place if that happens. And these are the slides I promised I would show you just regarding what we've funded over the years. It comes out to about 22 million in regional applications since 2006. And so, of course, the highest was in 2008. I don't know, a lot of you were around when the ARA funds, that was the last stimulus package that came out. I was doing grants, but it was in a different sector. I was actually doing National Institute of Health grants at that time. It was a very interesting time. So you'll see 2008 was at 4.7 million, the highest it's ever been. But so we hover around $1 million, 1.2 million, and have been for the last four years or so. So these are all the departments. These are all, public record. You can see these also on the AFG website. AFG posts the awards. They have I think they cut off now. It used to be you could go to the AFG site and you could see the departments that have been funded for the last 10 years, but just because of bandwidth, they had to take it off. They cut it off at 2016 now. You can still go and see who's been funded since 2016, I believe. I don't know if it'll let you filter by region, but these are all departments that have received regional grants. So it helps because you can take a look. These are all in Texas. So I just filtered for the Texas awardees just so you can get an idea of who's submitting applications out there and who's being successful.
Andrea, I want to chime in here. Sure. There are a good number of ESDs on that list, and it's not just the ones that say ESD, because I see some departments that I know are affiliated with ESDs that aren't listed with that ESD, and then there are some like the Montgomery County, the Magnolia, where they're listed with Montgomery County ESD 10. But the point there being is that this is something ESDs have gotten in the past and obviously have real access to.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. And yes, it is possible. And so and that's sort of what I discuss when I went to the conference this year, and which was great in the last couple of years. This is possible. And it does take additional orchestrating. It takes more planning, but there have been some great impacts that came out of these regional applications. So I know this may be a little hard to see on here, but I can get a more legible, spreadsheet out to Clay for distribution if that would be helpful. So, and then this is just a little chart of seeing how the funding has gone over the years since 2006. Again, you'll see that spike in 2008, and then we've kind of, maintained a little bit. FY17 was a little low. But again, averaging a little over $1 million for regional applications every year. So it's good to see that. And then, I thought this was interesting. A majority since 2006 of the regional applications have been in rural areas. And so that has always been the intent for regional applications, is to get the funds out where they are most inaccessible and where the greatest need is. And so, and I always like to remind people, especially when we look at a slide like this, is that you're competing with like departments. So, combination departments compete with combo departments, and career, competes with career. The greatest thing I think about the regional applications is that that aggregate power, those numbers, those dollars of population, the response areas are all aggregated to provide the biggest, not just bang for your buck, but the biggest regional impact. So honestly, the only thing standing between what we've been awarded in years past and the potential for the future, I think, is just a lack of knowledge of how to get started. And that's what we're here for. And so these do take a special kind of crafting to be successful in both the application and in the post-award environment, but it is possible. And so I facilitated myself several phone calls with a couple departments and saying, hey, Andrea, we're looking about going out for this. What do you think? And I know the end of my rope. I have no problem saying I'm not really sure. Let me get the fire service experts on the phone. The senior advisors at headquarters have been in the fire service for decades. And we just get on the horn and we figure it out, and the best course of action. So don't be intimidated because, as Clay mentioned and as I just showed you, it is possible. So the resources I just wanted to kind of drive home for you, the NOFO. The Notice of Funding Opportunity is very important. I've shown you where it's at on our website. Supporting definitions are very important. I get on a lot of technical calls for AFG, not just supplement, but also the base application, the regular AFG program. And all people say, well, what do you consider a primary first due response area? Well, what do you consider this? Well, are we eligible applicants? 99% of the questions, or the answers to those questions, are in the NOFO. So even when I go give talks in person, we have what I call a NOFO scavenger hunt. And, everybody gets a full copy of the NOFO, which is a pretty robust document. And we basically go hunt for parts or answers in the NOFO. So, so I'll ask, so what is a medium priority, or is a Quint a medium priority this year, in the regular program? And then they'll go try to find it in the NOFO. And so it's a very satisfying process when they can actually find it, but just goes to show that it can also be an intimidating document. So we also make sure that people are aware where the NOFO is, which is where I showed you, and that it's easy reading, but it's long reading. So, and then you have the other site here, performance.gov. Which is just a good place to go for general federal grant performance measures and grant program information. And then our email addresses. Again, I'm Andrea. Kathy Sievers is actually in training to take over the AFG program for our region. So we're training her to take that over this year completely on her own. And so she'll be, so she can contact either one of us. I've been working with Clay and Safety for the last few years, creating this partnership. And so I'm more than happy to step in as an immediate point of contact for that. But really anybody at Region can help you out. And with that, Clay, back to you for questions.
Okay, we've just got a little bit of time here before we get everybody out. I do want to mention once again how to get your last minute questions in, although we don't have a ton of time. You can call us at 512-251-8101. Email safed@texas.net. Texas is spelled out. You can fax us at 512-251-8152. Or you can text your questions to 512-567-0857. Normal text messaging rates apply. we do have a couple of really good questions that I want to hit. First, just a question here. When you're talking about regional applications, do they have to all be banded together, or can a department just go straight by themselves and input an application?
That's a good question. No, a regional application is defined as more than one department. So it could be 2 or it could be 20, but it has to be more than one.
Can they do is there such a thing as a non-regional application?
That's a good question. You mean, I know there isn't. There is not a classification for a non-regional application type. It is either by department, by single department, by State Fire Training Academy, a non-affiliated EMS, or regional application.
Okay, so a single department can file an application.
Yes, absolutely.
That's more what I was saying, because some of them are going to say, well, I don't have anybody else to go with me on this thing, but a single department can, right? Absolutely,
yes.
Okay, and another thing you said is a non-affiliated EMS. EMS is a big part of ESDs. There are some ESDs that are solely EMS based. How can they get access to this program?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, they're eligible to go out on their own as a single department applicant, or they can team up with other organizations for a regional application. But yes, they're an eligible applicant under AFG supplement and the base application.
We had a recommendation that I want to get out there for the record that they add another section for federal assistance to EMS as well as the assistance to firefighters. By adding the additional group for FEMA's program, you can find additional funding so that EMS isn't part of a firefighter group, that isn't a part of the firefighter group, can get help as well. So I think that's just a suggestion to maybe break off the EMS part of it and put a program just for EMS folks who may not be affiliated to firefighters and might get turned off by the assistance to firefighters. But it is worth noting that you said EMS organizations are eligible for this funding, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
We had another really good question that I wanted to hit, and I think this is going to be our last one. In the chat, which sometimes you guys chat. I'm getting some echo back there, Cliff. So anyway, buying PPE now with FEMA funding is behind the curve, which is understandable because they're responding to calls now and having to use the PPE. What about reimbursement for materials purchased specifically for this situation already? And I think you talked about the pre-cost stuff. Can you go through that again?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, the pre-award costs are eligible under the AFG supplement for the very first time in the program's history. So if you had expenses from January 1st of 2020 up until now, you can request reimbursement for those items if they were purchased in relation to the COVID-19 response.
Okay, excellent. I think with that, we just kind of come to the end. It's almost 7:30 and I got to get them their credit out. Andrea, thank you so much. If you will stop sharing your screen, yes. Although, they don't really need to get me in full view here of the pandemic beard, but, I don't want to deprive them of that either. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Safety is planning to do more of these. One thing, if you've had some of the issues, you maybe are in a rural area, maybe you're on satellite internet, we are working, in fact, we have already figured out a way to provide alternate access to these where they just be by teleconference and you could get the slides and follow along if your bandwidth isn't good enough to get the video. So we do have an option for that. Contact us for more information. We'd love to get you plugged in on that because we understand some of our folks out in rural areas in the hill country and whatnot do not have the video capabilities to get quite the full experience, and we understand. Hopefully you're seeing this on a recording or something if your video is already frozen. But do contact us because we have made some alternate arrangements. We're going to keep doing more of these. We want to bring more to you, since traveling we're not going to be able to do many workshops in the near future. Keep checking safe-d.org, which is our website for information.